Roger Soysett and Ed Woods today at the Atlanta History Center. It's April the 12th, 2012, interviewing Kurt Mueller, a veteran of the Vietnam War. This is part of the Veterans History Project for the Library of Congress. Mr. Mueller, would you please state your full name and address?
It's Robert Kurt Mueller, and the address is 3767 Oak Lane, Marietta, Georgia 30062.
Where were you born and how far back?
Far back, Tulsa, Oklahoma, in 1947, January 21st.
Okay, anything about your early years before you got into the service?
In terms of anything interesting, or what do you mean?
Well, where did you live? Did you...
Grew up in Tulsa, went to high school there, eventually went to school at Oklahoma State University, and then transferred to University of Tulsa. I finished school after I got out of the service, finished my degree, which was in chemical engineering. After that, went back to Tulsa eventually. My dad was a retired colonel from World War II, was a Pearl Harbor survivor. He was with the 25th Infantry Division, which was part of the reason I got that history, I guess you say, going back with a military family. And let's see, I have one brother, and he's still living, and played professional golf. And I was the unlucky one. I never got to play much of any sports other than what I picked, swimming and tennis, and so on like that. But other than that, my mother died when I was like 15 years old. My dad remarried a couple of years later, and then my dad passed away 2003, which should be, what now, almost 8+ years ago now. And my stepmom passed away. They were married for 39 years. So all my family members are gone other than my brother.
When did you decide to join the Army?
In about January of '68, I was at Oklahoma State. Actually, was in the School of Engineering, and was having to work. Back in those days, I had to pay for my own education, so I was having to work and go to school, and quite honestly, kind of got tired. Also, was watching a lot of what was going on the news at night, and really kind of felt frustrated about the situation going on, particularly with what was happening to our guys. And so I made a decision to drop out of school after basically the beginning of my third year, and join the service with the full intent I was going to go in the Special Forces, is what I thought I would do, which later changed, but anyway. And so I went in, and I think it might have been April of '68, I think, something like that.
So you joined, you weren't drafted?
So I joined, I volunteered.
Did you go to OCS?
Yes, I did, went to OCS. I graduated in '69. I don't remember the class number. I graduated in '69. Then went to Fort Carson as a platoon leader with the 5th Mech. Was there for less than about 6 months, and then got assignments. When I was in flight school, when I was in OCS, I qualified. I got into Special Forces, but also took the flight exam, qualified fixed wing and rotor wing, and so I had a choice of either which one. I turned down rotor wing only because in the Army there weren't many choices unless you could fly Mohawks, and that was going to be a slim chance. So from my perspective, if you wanted to have any kind of excitement, you could fly helicopters. So I applied, eventually was accepted, and got orders for flight school out of Carson, and then went to Fort Walters, Texas, actually in early '69, late '69, I guess it was. Did my basic helicopter training at Fort Walters like everybody did at that time. I had orders for Rucker. Many of us were on our way to go there. They changed them, and I went to Hunter and did all my advanced training at Hunter Army Airfield, which is where eventually I met my wife. So.
She wasn't your wife then?
No, not until I got back from Vietnam. So Anyway, and finished in the class of 7002, which was March of 1970. Took some time off and got in Vietnam the first week in May of 1970. I was, when I landed in country, it had been a while, and I have to say, a lot of the stuff is very, very vague. The unfortunate thing is so much of what I did for a whole year seems like I don't remember much. And I've gone to met with a number of my buddies, and thanks to some of the guys in this organization, got me involved in VHPA, and I've reconnected with many of the guys I flew with and fought with. And over time, they've kind of conjured up stories, and don't you remember doing this and doing that? And I kind of, some of it I remember, some of it I can't remember. I mean, they say you did these things, and I don't remember doing them, so.
Well, you got there just in time for the Cambodian incursion?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I was stationed, when I got in country, I was assigned to the C Troop, 3rd to 17th Air Cav out of Zion. The call sign was Charlie Horse. And when I got in country, did my traditional check ride, and then flew slicks. We were elected at that time to fly slicks.
Okay, you might want to explain to the uninformed what a slick is.
Okay, well, it is the UH-1H models. Basically, the aircraft that would carry could carry troops for insertion purposes. Our unit, the 3rd to 17th Air Cav, all both A Alpha, which was Silver Spurs, Charlie Horse, and B Troop, all were formed around, as I would call it, hunter-killer teams. We ran strictly surveillance, looking for bad guys, would neutralize anything we would find, and if we encountered some significant activity, we would call in the Air Force and then follow in behind the Air Force after they did their deal and pick up what's left over, gathering intelligence constantly, trying to figure out what was going on with the enemy. So when I first got in country, Cambodia had just, I think it had started, but we were flying really south of Zion, and not a lot of activity. We fly a number of missions during the day, and just kind of typical going out surveying areas. We always flew, typically down there we'd fly, we call it Pink Team 2 Cobras, a scout ship, and a slick. We'd carry, we had also a platoon of what we call ARPs, Aerial Reconnaissance Platoon, infantry guys assigned to us, and we would carry basically less than a squad, about 6 or 7 of them with us on a slick, and for the whole purpose of inserting if we found some activity, or if someone got shot down, we would insert them to secure the area and then help recover the guys.
Were you ever part of the hunter-killer team? The hunter-killer teams?
Well, that's, that's, when you say part of it, that was...
In other words, were you one end, either the target or the Cobra?
Well, they were, I later on, the second half of my tour, I ended up flying Cobras, mainly front seat, and I'll tell you more about that.
Okay.
But yeah, but most of the activity, we didn't hardly lose anybody, not to begin with. We went into Cambodia, flew out of Nui Ba Din, basically supported the 173rd, what somebody told me, but also an ARVN unit. If you remember in the Cambodia conflict, they had the Tricky Dicky line, which was like, was it 6 clicks inside Cambodia that you couldn't cross the line. And one of the things that the guys reminded me of, and because I was one day leading a mission going into Cambodia, and we had a really low cloud cover flying out of Nui Ba Din that day. So we decided to pull. I said, we'll get above cloud cover, and I had like a 1/100,000 map, which was not very good, quite honestly. And never flying in this area, we went to this one area. Let's remember, we were flying for probably about 15-20 minutes. Cloud cover started to dissipate, so I said, well, let's drop down. And we were up about 3,000 feet, so we dropped down about 1,500 feet, a little bit below the clouds. And what I do remember about Cambodia, there's a couple things. One, it was a beautiful country, especially the rubber plantations. I mean, just flying over the country area. But this one day, this is one of the things that always sticks in my mind, one of the things of how you kind of survive things. We were flying, and we decided we'd go low level, and we were flying a scout ship. In fact, the scout pilot, this guy named Larry Brown, and Larry and I are still good friends. He stayed with our unit all the way when we moved up on the DMZ, the latter part of 70s. And so anyway, we are flying low level over this area, and I just remember there were people out there doing some farming, and we were cruising maybe 150 feet above the ground. And we were coming up, and he was ahead of us, and we were coming up on what looked like a schoolhouse. And if you can picture this, you know, the French, a lot of French influence, especially in the building architecture. There was this big playground, I'd call it a playground, like a big, gigantic soccer field right in front of the, and a big schoolhouse off to the left, and I remember, because we were kind of coming, I would say, coming from the southeast, something to that effect. Anyway, big schoolhouse, tile roof, and I remember Larry said, well, I'm gonna go ahead and search it, you guys pull up to altitude, so we all pulled up and we're all kind of positioned. And he's out there cruising around. He says, it's kind of unusual. He said, I still remember, he says, I find it unusual that there are no kids out here today. And here it was, you know, lunchtime. So he goes cruising around. Well, at the end of this, I call it this large field or soccer type field. I didn't see any goals, but it looked like it could have been a soccer field. Was a kind of this hut, or I call it a structure, but with this big grass thatched hut, grass thatched roof on it. And so he kind of, you can see him, he's kind of going around over here by the school, and he kind of cruising around, and this, I mean, this thing's like equivalent to probably a couple football field length. And he's probably 20 feet off the ground, there's nothing, he just kind of cruising around. He goes over by this thatched roof hut, and out of the clear blue sky, about 3 NVA come running out of that hooch across the field. And he did, I mean, he must have come up and they heard him, and they came darting out of this thing, running across the field for whatever reason. And between he and his crew chief and the gunner, they eliminated all 3 of the guys. And he said, remember he said, these guys got brand new uniforms. They had brand new uniforms on. And we're saying to ourselves, how in heaven's name are we finding guys out here? Brand new uniforms. So anyway, he goes back over again, and I remember he had a couple more run across, and he shot those. Well, then a few more came out, and about this time, the grunts on board with us, everybody started, a couple of guys with the headphones out, so we're listening to what was going on. And they all were hanging out over the edge of the aircraft. Everybody, and a couple of them had their M16s out, and they want to start shooting these guys. It's like, I mean, we weren't more than 1,000 feet above ground, AGL at that time. And I remember saying, no, because you'll hit the daggone chopper down below you. So anyway, they quit, we pulled them back in, and then the next time we went over and threw a Willie Pete grenade on that deal, and it started burning. And then he said, well, let me go on the back, and he said, so he started around the back side of the deal, and we were kind of like circling out over on the far away from it. We couldn't see over the back side of it. We could just see the thing starting to burn, a little smoke. And he goes on the back side, and you hear him key his microphone as he's leaving, and you can hear a machine gun off, and he says, get out of here and get low real fast. Well, and he says, and so I said, what is it? He said, there's two deuce and halves, like he called, with 2 quad 50s in the back of it. And he said, they're cranking up and they're coming after us. And so we got out, because if we stayed out, they would have been sitting targets. They wouldn't have it, because we get low enough below the horizon, we could get out of the area. Well, anyway, the 2 Cobras went out and scooted out far out and came back in real low level, popped up. And one of the guys, I can't remember his name now, but I remember came up low, and these things were cranking up and getting ready to move, and they caught them just before they were, as they started around, and they were all in their trucks. I guess they heard the Cobras coming, and one of the guys, Salvoy, we were carrying flechettes that time, particularly on the outboards. We were running heavy hogs at that time, basically 2 Cobras with 2 pods, or 4 pods. And he salvoyed all his flechettes and hit center both of those trucks. And just, I mean, it basically turned everybody into hamburger meat, is what it did. Well, anyway, we after we finished that, we kind of go back and kind of look at, we can't believe all this, you know. And so anyway, we're flying back, and we realized, I'm looking at the map, that we were 8 clicks inside Cambodia. So we had crossed the Tricky Dicky line, and or there maybe even at 7, 8, something like that. But we knew we were past it, and we figured out these guys had stopped to rest, is what we figured, and they figured they were safe, because they were past, they knew where the Tricky Dicky line is, and they were brand new guys, and it was just not a good day for them, so.
Did anything of any consequence happen to y'all?
Well, we, on the way back, first of all, among ourselves, we decided, even to this day, well, of course we laugh about it, we, once we figured out where we were gonna keep ourselves quiet and not say anything about the coordinates. Somebody, and we don't know who it was. Of course, we had everybody, and their uncle was probably out scouting beyond the Tricky Dicky line. They didn't, you know, to watch what was going on. Anyway, somebody called in our activity, but couldn't get our unit insignia nor our tail numbers because of where we were. But just noticed some helicopters and encountered something. And so when we landed, I remember the major, it was Jim Danielson, who was our commander at that time, said, you guys were wanted to talk, and some colonel needs to talk to you guys. And we thought, and quite honestly, they were considering, if that was us, they were going to court-martial us. Of course, we all denied it, and never happened. But so anyway, we kind of got out of that. But that's how stupid the war was, you know.
That's I agree.
Yeah, how stupid it is, and we encountered these guys, and anyway, so yeah, we escaped that one, and other ones too. Later on, I take some up on the DMZ too. So almost got court-martialed again.
Went across the DMZ?
Yeah, went across the DMZ. Well, anyway, just a chronology of things. The last day of Cambodia. Cambodia ended like the last day of June, if I think it was like June 29th or 30th, whatever it was. And a lot of the guys that were in my, several of the guys in my unit, we all went through flights, a couple of us went through flight school together. And if we weren't in my troop, they were an Alpha troop or B troop. We all, a bunch of us just happened to get orders to go to the same, all part of the 1st Aviation Division within the same basic same organization. Anyway, my good buddy, my roommate all the way through flight school, Cal Binder, we were roommates at Fort Walters and then eventually at Hunter. He went on and finished flight at Cobra School before he came over at Hunter, and then got in country about 30 days ahead of me and got assigned to Alpha Troop. And he was flying, I guess he got in there about the 1st of June, 2nd of June, something like that. Anyway, so we got him reconnected. He was flying missions, and we were kind of somewhat parallel territories and all that. And the last day of Cambodia, he got shot down. He was flying with a guy that, believe it or not, was from Enid, Oklahoma. I do remember that. But the pilot got shot, and fatally shot. And I guess Cal tried to recover the aircraft is all we knew. But he landed, he crash landed so hard that it killed him. I just remember I didn't go pick him up, but some of my other buddies picked him up, and they said it wasn't anything that you wanted to see. So anyway, the next thing I know, about 3 days later, after his parents had been notified, I get called in by the major and says, you've got to go back to the United States, and you've been requested to escort Cal's body back. And that was a traumatic situation. To have to leave country, I guess it was about around the 4th of July or thereabout. Fly back, escort the body, and of course it was a closed casket deal. And I still remember, I don't remember much of it, but I do remember one thing that just really irritated me beyond belief. I don't remember the airlines it on, but what we had a protocol we had to follow. We wore this black armband, I remember, and anytime they moved the body, I had to stand at attention and come to a salute. And so every time they do, we had to change planes twice. So wherever I was in one of the big cities, His casket was in the baggage area, so I was standing at the window watching it, standing at attention and saluting as it's coming out of the airplane. And I just remember there were two black guys down there, baggage handlers, and they were laughing and joking about something. And the thing's coming off, and the next thing is they're trying to handle the thing, and the casket falls off and hits the ground. And they're laughing. Well, I came unglued. I wanted not only to get them, have you ever been so mad that you just want to cry? I mean, just angry, I was just beside myself. And that's one of the things, and so I went up to the ticket agent who, and I told him, and I was just almost in tears. And I still remember just told him how upset I was, and I expected him to do something, and he didn't know what to do, quite honestly. He was beside himself too. Other than I went back over there, and they're trying to get the thing back up on the deal and all that, but they're still laughing, you know. And I'm talking about the disrespect, you know. But anyway, so ended up, he went to Iowa, Rembrandt, Iowa is where his parents lived, and went there and met his parents, got off the airplane, they had an honor guard there and all that. And the first thing his parents asked me, he said, how do we know that's Cal? You know, they called him Bill, but anyway, they said, well, I just know it is, and I had my story straight as much as I could get my story straight. And they never formally asked me to open the casket, but I was told it did not allow them to open the casket. And I knew what happened, and I'm afraid to say, because I do know what really happened. And his parents, his dad was a B-17 tail gunner from World War II. They're still living. They actually came to my wife's Maryland and our wedding back after I got back from Vietnam. So I have stayed friends with both of them. Both parents are still living in their late 80s. To this day, they still call my wife and I on our anniversary. They call us on Christmas.
Fantastic.
I have stayed in touch. We see them. When I went to the Vietnam helicopter pilot reunion in San Antonio, they lived in Austin, Texas, in one of those sunrise communities, and they were my guest of honor. You know, at the VHPA, and particularly when we honored Cal and a bunch of the other guys who were fallen, we always do a memorial service to everybody all the pilots that were lost. And so it's to this day. But anyway, here's what's interesting. Even going back in San Antonio, which is, I'm going to say 5 years ago now, maybe it was 4 years ago, whatever, but we're at breakfast, and Ron Miller, who is a good friend of mine, who also in the VHPA, was with us, and one of the other guys, oh gosh. Anyway, we're sitting at breakfast before we get ready to leave San Antonio, and I remember still Mrs. Binder looks across the table at me and he said, so how did Cal really die? What happened? I mean, you realize that this has been like 37, 38 years. So just think about, you know, I always think about the guys that lost, a lot of my friends have lost their lives, and what the parents dealt with. You know, still to this day, you know, you think about that. So, But anyway, that was kind of traumatic. I go back country, get in, ask him to come pick me up, and he says, oh, guess what? And I called him, I forgot who. I called somebody to come pick me up from Ben Law again, and he said, we're moving. And I said, oh, where? I says, I thought we were getting ready to go home, maybe like the war is over or something like that. Well, anyway, got back, got back about 3 days later. Remember the major pulled down, we had this big map, and we're in this briefing room. I just remember this big map, and he points, gentlemen, we're moving there, and he points up there. And my first thing I said to him says, looks like North Vietnam. We're going to invade North Vietnam. Of course, you know, Zeon, way down in the three-quarter area, I didn't, you know, that was like the Heatherlands. No one knew where that was. And he said, no, we're moving to Quan Tri, and we've got to be out of here in 2 weeks and stationed up there. And I says, oh my God. You know, so anyway, nothing was going on much in the DMZ at that time. So anyway, we trek up, we pack everything up, and boy, that was, you know, it was easy for me because I was just a pilot, so I could just carry my stuff. But I had to make couple trips to help move everything up there. which is a long flight from one end of the country to the other. And quite interesting too, because you can fly along the coast and those, you can see some cool stuff, and fly a low level through Cameron Bay and buzzing the ships. We did, some cool fun stuff. And then we get to Quantry, and there's a 101st Air Cat unit stationed up there. And then there's a big runway, and there's a call sign Barkey, which is an OV-10 unit across the runway from us, and there's a hospital, I can't remember, anyway, kind of like a pretty good sized hospital there, and the 5th mech was that running around in the countryside at that time. And we were the only two at Quantry, other than the 101st and our unit, were the only two units up there. We got up there 30 days later after we're there, which is about August, maybe the end of August, something like that. They decided to change the name of our unit or redesignate us D Troop 3rd of the 5th, which we then became part of the 5th mech. And then we became part of the 9th Infantry. And I don't, quite honestly, all that's a blur. And our commanding officer at that time, Jim Danielson, who was a major, had left, and Rodney Wolf became our commanding officer. And in those times, the troops were all managed by majors. I was at that point in time second lieutenant, almost to be a captain. And I remember, anyway, all that kind of what happened. What's interesting is we kept our same call sign of Charlie Horse, and we stayed with that. And one of the reasons they moved us up on the DMZ, our unit, versus Alpha or Bravo Troop, is because of our reputation of what we did in Cambodia, come to find out. So a lot of the stuff that we were doing increased.
Illegally.
Huh?
Illegally.
Well, whatever we did, we had a reputation for being pretty fearless and kind of
That's good.
And
So what you weren't supposed to do before, do it again?
well, so here we go. We go to the DMZ, and I just remember we were in these Quonset huts, and we were where we were sitting. I don't know what was there before, but at least the power was not that good up there. At least down south where we were, Zeon. When I came back from country, I brought a little air conditioner with me. I found out when we were on the DMZ, they says you don't have hardly any power up there, so I sold my air conditioner to a good friend of mine which was probably a stupid thing, because anyway, we move in these Quonset huts, which are hotter than hell, but we're sitting on this, right along the river. We're probably no more than 2 or 3 clips from the ocean at this time of Quantry. That's one thing I remember. But if you took off flew north out of Quantry, within 15 minutes you could be at right on the DMZ in North Vietnam.
Very familiar.
Oh, yeah, so you know where, yeah. So anyway, we took, what was the highway that went all the way out toward Quai Son? The Highway 9. We'd fly that, we'd cover some convoys every once in a while, cover some convoys going out. Vandergrift was out that way, the Rock Pile, all these things you probably remember. Razorback,
Pine Tree.
Quite well, out of Point, yeah, if you go.
Convien.
So anyway, we're flying out there, mainly doing, in fact, the missions, about this time, to back up, I thought I was going to fly scouts for a while, so I tried flying scouts for about 2 weeks, and before they let you become the aircraft commander or pilot, you had to prove, in fact, that you could engage, you could find the bad guys, and then if you did find them, you wouldn't, you wouldn't freeze, and because one instant you'd be dead in 2 seconds. So anyway, I still remember, and I did that down south for about, before we moved up on the DMZ, and I flew with a guy named Phil Nelson, who eventually retired as a major, and I still remember flying, and he put me in right seat, had me an M60 machine gun, chicken plate, and back in those days, we had a foot pedal or foot switch where you could have intercom, but they'd taken the cyclic out of it on the right side. We flew 58s. We were the first combat unit to fly 58s in a combat role. So anyway, I still remember we were flying, and I decided we'd go out, and my job, other than the crew chief and gunner in the back who was flipping back and forth between the sides, I was always cover the right side of the aircraft anytime we were doing, so I was looking constantly this way and looking for bad guys. We were flying along a river one day, and I'm kind of looking this way, and of course I got the seat's got a, it's got a bulletproof deal, so I kind of have that with me. Plus I'm hanging out of the aircraft with an M60 machine gun and a red smoke grenade in my hand. Drop the red smoke grenade and fire. That's what I was told. First time you see them, shoot. So about this time, we're looking out, and all of a sudden I hear it says, "I got something." And I turn around and I look, and we had just passed, right along the river, 15 guys jumped up out of the woods, or out of the grass. The guy in the back caught him just as we went past. I never caught him. And after that deal, I said, I'm not gonna live through this deal. So I decided I wasn't gonna fly scouts at that point. That's, I had nerves, but you're brave, but brave up to a point. I said, this would be a short-lived experience. We go up on the DMZ, we're flying. I've ended up wanting to go fly guns for a while, so we've checked out flying front seat and all that stuff. And we're doing a lot of covering scouts and doing those typical missions right up around Quezon. Quezon was not reopened this time. What I remember about Quezon and that area, particularly out there toward the border, the Laotian border, it was like a garbage dump. There were nothing but gigantic craters, trash everywhere that I remember. And we'd catch these gooks out there running around picking up stuff. And they were kind of like, I don't know what they didn't think we would see them, but they got also very, very smart. In fact, they were much smarter because these guys were not Viet Cong. We were dealing with Viet Cong down south, other than when we got into Cambodia. But these were all regular VA forces, the ones we were encountering, because of the Highway 9. We were trying to cut off Highway 9, that traffic deal. Our whole mission when we moved up there, in fact, none of us knew why we did, but our whole purpose was to do reconnaissance and to gather enough intelligence, because it was really us and this other 101st Air Cav unit, to go out there and gather intelligence about activity for planning for Lam Son 719. And that was the whole, and we figured it out one day. Well, anyway, we flew and flying missions up in that area. I still remember the gooks they were extremely wise. In fact, one of the guys we were flying cover for one day, one of the scout pilots, and as you know, this typical scout pilot, he'd be flying 15 feet off the ground, and he's watching for footprints, and he can see it. Look, I got some, and he can tell, particularly if we went out early morning, because you could tell from the dew, or late evening, because you could also smell fires if they're cooking anything. So, I mean, these guys were they had a sixth sense about them. They knew where they were, they could smell them out, they could see footprints from 15 feet off the ground. You could kind of see some movement. And that's why we always went early morning and kind of light, not in the middle of the day, you never find them. They're all camped off somewhere doing something. So anyway, this one guy said he got some movement and he flew down and he ran right into it. They pulled him down into a trap and hit him with 250 calibers from both sides. And and we knew at this point in time we were going to be in trouble. It's not anything like we encountered before. We eventually equipped took our M60s. When we got up on the DMZ, we took the inboards rockets off the Cobras and mounted on the right side or starboard side, I guess. It's 20 millimeter Vulcan system, three-bladed, three-barrel cannon system. We mounted that on it because we were getting hit by 37 millimeter and 51 cals from up there, which we didn't experience down south. It was all mainly small arm stuff. And then we mounted 50 calibers on our slicks, and which was an interesting task at hand because we had to figure out that thing vibrates like crazy. And so we came up with our own mounting devices and put rubber shocks on them, because the first time we went out there, the next thing I come back and the rivets of the frame it started to come apart. But we had to equip ourselves with stuff up there that we never experienced down south.
This was in what year?
71. It's right before Lam Son 719, which started in
Were they still? Was Quezon still an active camp at the time?
No, it was completely dead at that point.
Quezon was abandoned.
It was a garbage dump. But I still remember we didn't know what we were doing, but we kept thinking, and I'll tell you a couple other, this was some other interesting stories that we were part of, which we never knew until later on what we were doing. But we figured there must be something going on, because all of a sudden here came CH-53s and Chinooks, and the big cranes were flying into Quan Tri, and lots of C-130s, and everybody, I mean, and they were bringing all this engineering equipment, bridges and stuff like this, so we figured we must be getting ready to do something. We're gonna invade somebody. And of course, we were watching the thing, and the next thing I know, you know, it's February, and Lam Son 719 starts, and our job during Lam Son 719 was to cover the Arvins, provide cover for them as they would go into Cambodia, gun cover for them. So we would, we encountered tanks, Russian tanks. One day, I still remember, and I was flying Cobras this day, and I still remember.
You did say Cambodia, you mean Laos?
Oh, Laos, I'm sorry,
Yeah, okay.
Laos, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
Laos. The Arvins had this one hill, and we're flying over the thing, and I still remember one of the guys flying the and says, "Oh, I'm going over," and he says, "Oh, yeah, it looks like," he looked down there and he said something about, yeah, and it looks like they got a tank down here. And the next thing there, he says, well, wait a minute. And the next thing he sees a muzzle flash coming out of the tank, and he flies over it, and this doggone NVA had run up over the hill and put a tank up there, and we're shooting at us. Didn't hit anything, but flew some night missions up there, inserted, I would call it, those special ops guys that up on the tri-border area. It was fun. Nighttime was scary though, because the only thing good about nighttime, you knew where the bad guys were, and you could see the green tracers coming, and you could see them, and they never hit us. They'd always miss us. You know, thank God. But we had recovered. I put the guys in for one time, and 2 weeks later we'd pick them up, and I just remember some of these guys were badly hurt. I don't know how these guys did that work, quite honestly. Worked a lot with the Air Force. Air Force used to bring Phantoms up and drop bombs, and it was amazing to watch those guys. We'd sit off to the side. They ran arc lights up there, and we'd fall in behind the arc lights, and you'd see the gooks run around with their ears bleeding. I mean, I don't know how they withstood all this stuff. But we were just blowing the hell out of them. At the same time, we were losing a lot of guys. I lost another good friend of mine, got shot down, crash landed as he hit. The gooks came up on him and just killed he and the other guy. His name was John Hunter. Killed him and the front guy flying front seat, Carl Naka, who was fairly new. He'd only been in the country probably about a month and a half. And just killed both of them when they hit the ground. And another guy flying up there. We made some mistakes too, because it was getting the cloud cover up in the mountains. We weren't using heavy overloaded, and they in a dive couldn't pull up and ran right into a mountain and just blow up, you know. So mistakes plus being shot. We lost. Let's see. In the time we were up there, I think we lost out of our troop. I may be mistaken, but it was like 24 guys, crew members, 24, 25 guys, which is pretty substantial for our. In fact, we were one of the highest casualties of all the units during Lam Son 719. The tail end of my tour, the guy who was a maintenance officer over at Huey's decided he's going to leave, and Rodney came to me and asked me if I would take over the maintenance. And I said, well, I get to fly missions. And he said, yeah, you'll get to fly. You either get to go pick up the aircraft that were shot down. And so I took over the maintenance for Huey's, right at Lam Son 719. And I lost my roommate. In fact, I brought a picture of him. The guy that I roomed with down south at that time, and his name was Tom Knopic, and Bob Bunny was our crew chief. And this is a picture of, in fact, let me pull it out of this, and this is a picture of myself over on this side, Bob Bunny in the middle, and Tom on my right. Anyway, Tom had 2 weeks left in country, and one of the guys, one of our pilots, we had some, I call them cowboys, that would screw up around with the aircraft, you know, and a couple of guys were known for kind of taking chances. Well, one of the guys brought the aircraft back in and said, they said, oh, we heard this cracking sound, and so I said, I tried to get it out of the crew chief and out of the pilot, but they had a problem with it, the aircraft. This was a Huey. So anyway, it said, it sounded like it was coming around from the tail boom. And so anyway, we pulled the aircraft in, pulled the tail boom off, and we had tech reps up there too, from both sheet metal and Bell tech reps and people like that who would come work some of our maintenance guys, with our maintenance guys. Looked at everything and reinforced the hard points. There are 4 big hard points that are held with these big cadmium placed bolts that aren't that big to hold the tail boom on. Of course, in flight, there's virtually no weight on the end, the tail boom, if you keep it trim. And two of us can pick up the tail boom and easily move it. So anyway, put it back on, and I go to Rodney Wolf, and he said, we need to take this out and fly it and make sure it stays on. Because we thought it was something with the tail boom, and couldn't find anything wrong with it. So he said, take it out to the ocean and go fly and put some stress on the tail boom. And I said, okay. So I said, what does that mean? He said, just put stress on it, vertical, horizontal stress, and if it stays together, we'll be okay. So I took my crew chief with me at that point in time.
If it did stay
Yeah.
together, you wouldn't be okay.
Well, and then, see, the other thing he said I wouldn't fly real high. Because if you do lose the tail boom, you lose center of gravity, you will flip upside down. And you usually don't survive. You won't survive. So I'm flying low level. I'm just going to give you I go out to the coast, and all roundabout story, and I go out there, and I'm flying 60 knots sideways, kick around, fly 60 knots the other way sideways, pull the thing up in the nose, you know, but I'm flying 15, 20 feet off the ground. And I'm telling my crew chief, I have him sitting at the back, it's just me and my crew chief, and he is sitting back against the panel back there, and I'm sticking his head going from one side to the other, back around the back side of the engine, the transmission compartment. I said, you hear the first funny sound, you stop me and I'm putting the thing down, and we'll walk back. You know, I'm not going to take the chance. Anyway, we survived all that. I go back, we pull the tail boom off, look at everything, put it back on. And this was Rodney Wolf's aircraft. Come to find about, he was flying. It was almost a brand new aircraft. And I think it probably had at that point maybe 150, 200 hours on the thing. So it had already gone through 2 PEs. Anyway, next thing I know, Tom and Benton Miller, Tom Knopik and Benton Miller were doing one of his final check rides. And he had basically 2 weeks left in the country. And I'm standing right outside the hangar, and I'm kind of watching him come in, and we were laughing because he was doing auto rotations, and we quit doing touchdown auto rotations. We pulled power on right at the last minute, you know, especially the last couple of months in country. We weren't doing touchdown auto rotations. You didn't have to. So anyway, he's coming in, and he's flying in behind. It might have been a C-130, it could have been a Chinook or something, but anyway, he's coming in, you could see him coming right over the end of the runway, basically on a north approach, and the next thing I know, I look out there and an aircraft falls out of the sky. I mean, and the next thing is a big plume of black smoke falls. And I was in shock. We grabbed the Jeep, and we knew it was one of our aircraft. I didn't know it was them, quite honestly. But anyway, we drive out there, and I remember driving up to it, and to this day, the aircraft had, the tail boom had split, second donut back, there's the hard point, and then there's all these donuts, I call it reinforcing. It split, the skin had split on the bottom side of the tail boom, and snapped the tail boom, and the tail boom kind of came up and separated itself. The aircraft dropped from probably 300 or 400 feet in the air, upside down, kind of crashed. And this is how funny things are, crazy things are. When I used to fly with Tom, I used to get on him all the time. And even though he was senior to me, because he was in country a lot longer than I was, and he'd always raise his seat up real high. He'd fly with the cyclic down real low, you know, down here. Well, I always flew down low where I could, get as low as I could anywhere, just, you know. Anyway, and I always get on him. I says, you gotta get out of doing it. He says, no, this is most comfortable for me. So he'd have the cyclic down real low in between his legs. Well, the first thing I go up on the aircraft, and this thing is burning a little bit, and I was the first guy there along with one of the other guys. And I run up to the aircraft, and this thing is upside down, and I see them both in there, and they're both still strapped in their seats. And when I got there, I knew they were both dead. But I still remember trying to pull him out of the aircraft, and the thing's starting to burn. Somebody grabs me and pulls me back out of the aircraft, away from it. And the aircraft, finally, they got the fire kind of put out. But I still remember the first thing I looked at when I looked at it, his seat was up high. First thing I says, gosh, that's what killed him. That's how crazy it is. Had nothing to do with it, but my suspicion is it probably broke both their necks and killed them. But they were not bad anyway. They weren't badly cut up, but it to this day. And I blame that, and I still know this guy, I still don't know what happened. I figure I never got the truth on the aircraft. But here's what's interesting, it was only 2 hours difference from the time I flew it, and also Rodney Wolf flew it, that the thing came out of the sky. Otherwise, so you're talking about, it's not supposed to be your day to die.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it was just, it was amazing. It was just, and I count my blessings, you know, I always made a deal with God, if you'll get me back out of this country, I'll be a great, loyal person. Well, I kept the promise a little bit. Eventually, I became better at that, but anyway, that was pretty traumatic, you know, and anyway, there's, and then, let's see, I still remember, I had to teach my crew chief how to fly, because when we go pick aircraft up, I think I picked up 2 or 3 58s during that time, and had to have, recover them, and they were shot down, so I had to fly out and carry, basically, take a little bit of fuel, couldn't take any weapons with us, just put my crew chief, because he'd have to hang off the aircraft to make sure we could hook up the aircraft to pull it sling loaded out of the jungle or somewhere, wherever it landed.
Is a 58 a pick
OH-58, no,
Okay,
it's a scout
okay,
ship, yeah,
okay.
OH-58, Kyle was
Yeah.
the deal. So anyway, we were still flying those when we moved up on the DMZ, but I still remember flying out there, and I'd fly out by myself, and I always taught I put him up in the front seat with me, and I taught him how to fly, so if anything ever happened to me, he couldn't hover the aircraft, but he could fly it straight and level. And I said, well, that's great. If you got a problem, so we used to practice this coming back in, or we were flying, we'd do some touch and goes, and I didn't get him to fly, and I taught him how to make an approach, a low-level approach, like a fixed-wing aircraft coming in, and where he could land it. And I says, and we get down low enough, and I says, you keep looking 150 feet out ahead of you, and you keep the cyclic straight, and you just put down the collective a little at a time, and you'll feel it touch, and you just keep the pedals, keep the nose straight. And I said, and I coach him, and I says, you're going to land it just like an airplane. And it will, once you get down, you put the collective down, and you don't put it down fast, real slow. Real slow. You push it down too fast, you won't be able to control the nose, especially going on asphalt. So anyway, but I taught him how to land the thing that way, just in case, because he couldn't hover. If he brought to a hover, we'd flip over and die. So anyway, he could do that. But anyway, I still remember we were out there one day picking up this aircraft, and I had 2 Cobras. I had a scout ship below me making sure there was nothing coming up, and I had 2 Cobras flying out 180 degrees on me, watching. And I'm sitting there hovering above the trees, about 25 feet above the trees, trying to pull this 58 out of the trees. And I still remember telling my crew chief, and I said, this is not a good day today. You know, I kept thinking that we are a sitting duck. And this was like 3 weeks before I was supposed to go home. You know, and you always think, and I'll tell you what, I was brave up until about the last 30, 45 days, and I really got scared. You know, I really did. I was, concerned about, getting killed, and sitting out there hovering above these aircraft, and Lam Son 719 was over, just about over at this time. But in fact, when I left country, they went through all the 58s and went back to flying Loaches. The 101st, they started to move out of Quang Tri.
When did you leave country?
In May of '71. One other thing we got to do on our off days, we made good friends with the Air Force guys across the runway from us. So our off days, they used to fly front seat in our Cobras, the Earth pilots, and we get to fly back seat in the OV-10s. And it was a joke, it was kind of a running thing, because we would, there were about 3 or 4 of the guys that would come and fly with us, and there were about maybe half a dozen of us that would volunteer and go fly with them. So we had to go through, you know, about injection seats and all that stuff in case we got shot down, and how to inject out of these aircraft. And of course, I never parachuted out of anything that was perfectly flying. So, well, anyway, we're flying, and I still remember, and part of it was we'd run missions up there, and these guys were really searching targets and marking targets, and they worked in concert with us a lot too. But what a nice aircraft. Boy, it was easy to fly. I couldn't take off and land it, but you could fly it once you got it up. But we do aerobatics. Part of it we do an airline roll, and we pull, I forgot, this aircraft would pull easily 6 Gs. And it was amazing. And part of the deal was they tried to make us throw up, or we'd pass out. And I still wore my same helmet, but you could, I tell you what, the microphone on my helmet, we used to pull that microphone just with a G's, would pull all the way down. And he said, you gotta push on your legs when you're doing this. Now, we're not flying jets, but we're still pulling G's and these things, much different than we even pull in Cobras. But what a nice aircraft. And a couple of guys Cobra pilots would pass out. And it was kind of a running joke. If you did pass out, then you got all sorts, you had to buy drinks that night.
I know in the area you were in, I know the area well. The I-Corps was controlled mostly by Marines at the time I was there.
Yeah, right.
Now, was the Marines there when you were there?
No.
They had already pulled them out?
Yeah, Marines were all gone. It was just as far as I remember, it was just, and the ARVNs, their ARVN units, and then the 5th.
I just didn't know how you and the Marines worked.
Well, I will tell you this, the Marine, they had a Cobra detachment out of Da Nang that did came up there eventually and did work. There was and I don't remember the colonel's name, but a couple of their guys ran into a problem one time, and and with their Cobras, they had some problems. They were flying J model Cobras at this time in '71 with the twin engine jobs, and they had the 20mm cannon in the nose turret. And they had run into some problems. I remember they came in and landed, and I kind of helped the guys out, put them up, fix their aircraft for them. And so I get this call from the colonel, telling me how much he appreciates I did. And he said, if I can ever help you, and I said, well, yes, you can. He says, do you have any blades for Cobras? And I said, do you have any engine? You know, particularly blades. I was short on blades. And the Navy, being part of the Navy, they had everything. So this guy, he said, anything, I'll get you anything you need. You just have to bring me a replacement that I can get a replacement. So we worked a bartering system out, and I still remember going to the officers club down there in Da Nang, and went down there, and he loved our cab hats, wanted the cab hats, so I was trying to scrounge one up for him. I wanted one of the leather jackets. He wouldn't get me a leather jacket, but he did give me a one-piece Nomex suit, which is what our 2-piece jobs. I still have those 2 suits to this day. But yeah, Marines, I don't remember the guy's name, but he bald-headed, smoked cigars, but just as nice, and we were really good friends. We got to be good, at least during a short period of time.
Yeah.
Anyway, one other interesting thing is, do you remember the situation when the Air Force was flying 53s and went up to try to recover some POWs out of some POW camps, right, in 1971?
Yeah.
Those 53s, when they exited on that mission, went to the coast, flew down the coast, and came to Quang Tri. I just remember we were told we were kind of.
That was the raid on Son Tay.
Yes, it was Son Tay. Yes.
Yeah.
In fact, there's a whole book around it. What's interesting, they don't mention our unit's name, but our unit we called up and brought up some gun cover to cover them coming out of North Vietnam. We had no idea what they were doing, but they said, well, when they landed at Quang Tri, those 53s were out at the end of the runway, and I wasn't flying that day, but I remember I saw them land out there, so I started to go out there. I said, we haven't seen 53s. Well, the next thing I know, the aircraft are kind of shutting down, and here comes one of the crew chiefs, and And I said, can I help you? He says, yeah, I need some he needed some hydraulic lines. And I said, well, let me come out there and look at it. He says, no, you can't come and look. Just tell me, here's what I need. Can you make some hydraulic spool pieces for me, some lines? And had no idea why, but I did kind of walk out a little bit, and those aircraft were peppered. You wouldn't believe the holes all through the thing. And so they did whatever they encountered. They encountered a lot of fire, must have encountered. We'd had, no one knew at all. Even after they left, when they got the aircraft fixed, they had no idea where they went. We had no idea where they were coming from and what they did. They were completely hush on that mission, even after it was over with. And so I still remember that crew chief. I still remember that guy coming up, and he was insistent on that. He says, you cannot go near the aircraft. And so there must have been something going on. But anyway, to kind of small bit of history. Anyway, that's.
So May of '71, you returned?
I came home, ended up, got married, and let's see, when did I get married? Oh, in June of '71.
You need to remember this.
Yeah, well, no, I was trying to think. It was quickly afterwards. And that's what was amazing is that my wife, who I met at flight school, she graduated from Armstrong State University, was a school teacher. And we stayed in touch. I met her on R&R in Hawaii, and we got engaged in Hawaii, and then got married when I got back, and got married in Savannah, Georgia, and then got stationed at Fort Jackson. One of the guys I got to know, a doctor in Vietnam, his dad was a colonel who was getting ready to retire, one of the more senior colonels at Fort Jackson. And I ended up talking with the colonel on the phone. He said, I'll get you. And I said, I want to maintain my flight status because I had less than 1,000 hours time. And being a captain, I was low in the totem pole in terms of seniority. And they offered me, they said, well, you can become a basic training company commander, being an infantry guy. And I said, no, thank you. Because it was a glorified babysitting job is what I was told. And I didn't anticipate staying in at this point because the war was ending. So I ended up getting a job up at Fort Jackson, maintained my flight status, which was interesting. Ended up flying mainly 13s, Bell 13s most of the time. I did fly Hueys some, so I maintained my flight status. Probably flew at least 2 or 3 times a week, and had a staff position in the new reception center. And
when you flew back home, did you fly civilian or did you fly?
yeah, I flew civilian.
How were you treated, and where did you?
Well, I'll tell you what, we flew. I say flew civilian. It was on a big aircraft. All I remember everybody screaming when we took the thing, got off the ground. I don't remember much. I don't know where we ended up. I ended up in San Francisco. I got off the aircraft, and I need a very, very vague. This is what I've shared with you is just snippets of things that have only come back because of conversations I've had. A lot of this stuff, some things I did remember. But anyway, I got off the aircraft, got a taxi, handed the guy, I forgot where I was going, from the airport to a hotel, handed the guy $20. He grabs my I think the taxi bill was $3. He grabs my $20 and takes off and spits at me. And he wasn't even an American. I don't know what nationality he was. I don't know what he was, but it was just, I was mad as hell. I only weighed like, this time like 160 pounds, so, and I didn't feel like fighting anymore. I was exhausted. I was just tired beyond you can probably imagine. I remember getting home, flying back to Tulsa. Marilyn, my fiance at that time, met me. My grandmother met me. My dad, everybody met me. And they said, welcome home, Captain Kurt. And that's what the guys called me in Unit back in those days. So anyway, came back and eventually got married, went to Fort Jackson for probably about 6-7 months. Took me about 3 times to apply to get out, and then went back to school, University of Tulsa, and finished my degree, and then life went on.
Here you are.
For 40-some odd years. And then,
what have you been doing since you, where are you retired from?
Retired, well, my last job, I worked in the commercial construction business for 15 years, one company for 10 years, and then the competitor recruited me, and I told him I worked 5 years, and I quit him after 8 years and 8 months in the commercial deal. But I had a career that varied all over the map, from being an engineer to food and beverage business, ice cream business, bottled water business, consulting business. Retired, formed a consulting company. Still work some. Still, when it doesn't interfere with golf and tennis nowadays.
The important thing.
Yeah, I do sit on I have a White House appointment to sit on a committee in Washington D.C. for Veterans Business Affairs, which is a passion of mine. Kind of helping veteran-owned business owners, and so we help make recommendations for policy changes and legislative changes that impact the veteran business community now. So I do that.
Well,
Anyway, so that's about all I'm.
Okay, you have any final thoughts you'd like to use to wrap this up?
Oh, I'm just thankful. I guess I'm still alive. I look back at the things that we all kind of experienced, and and I certainly didn't experience half of what some of the other guys did. I can tell you that. You know, I will say this: I flew and fought with some tremendous warriors. Some guys are extremely brave. Larry Brown is one of them, who just, I mean, he had like 3 Silver Stars, 3 DFCs. I mean, he was wounded 3 times. In fact, the last time I saw him, he was before I left country. He was fearless. Some of these guys were just absolutely fearless. And he was a scout pilot, I mentioned. Another guy I flew with, I mean, several of them were just, I guess we all were to a point, but some guys were more fearless than others. Probably because of the reputation argument. Yeah, they were extremely brave, and would put their own lives at risk, like we all did, to kind of help save somebody.
Well, I'd like to thank you for your service and for the time you've given us in this interview.
and welcome home.
No, thank you very much. Was this helpful?
I think it was fantastic.
Okay.